like, okay, we thought it would be a lot easier. Yeah. No, 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 no. Just trying to figure out, okay, how we gonna do this? Having the conversations around money, and so this, it's hard. It's hard. It's really hard right now. It's so that gives more time to get it together.
Yeah, same, same.
Hey, 1 minute. That's what they told us, though. Don't say nothing. When I left, they all gave me a party with T-shirts that said, "Be happy."
No, they did. Yes, they did. This ends up being a whole thing.
I was like,
It ended up being a whole thing.
I would have heard what he said.
I would love to see that T-shirt. Like that is something else. It really is. I would love to see that. Like, literally, I would love to see that. Oh my goodness.
We're about ready to start. Let's start on time. There we go. Ready? Yep. Ready? What's that? Oh, you want to start? Go ahead. That was.
Good morning. Can y'all hear me? Y'all must not hear me. Can y'all hear me? Now, I know we talked about this last night. I told y'all we were going to try it again in the morning, right? Because I felt like, you know what, man, it was a long week. It was a Friday. We were struggling. So let's try it again. Good morning. See, that's the energy I'm looking for. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the 16th annual Beyond the Bars Conference. Somebody is on it, right? I took me a little coffee this morning, but we're here. This year's conference theme is Rooted In. We have a really wonderful day for you today. I will start by, in the way that we do, offering a land acknowledgement. First of all, let me just introduce myself because I can't imagine that everybody knows who I am. My name is Shonda Chapman. I am a Beyond the Bars Fellowship alumni. I also co-directed the Beyond the Bars Fellowship with my lovely colleague Cameron Rasmussen. Cameron's over in the corner playing it low-key today, but that's fine. And this is just, I say that this is one of my families, right? I have a few families, but this is one of the sort of larger extended families, and I'm really grateful to be here with you all in this moment. Let's see if my phone, I'm a lady of a certain age, so I gotta turn to the side so I can see it. So as we gather from places across the country, we offer our gratitude and our joy to be able to convene here on the traditional and contemporary homelands of indigenous peoples. We acknowledge the land politically designated as New York City to be the unceded homeland of the Lenape people, who were violently displaced as a result of European settler colonialism over the course of 400 years. The Lenape are a diasporic people that remain closely connected with this land and are its rightful stewards. We also recognize that New York City has one of the largest urban Native populations in the United States. We commit to working together to honor our past and to build our future with truth. We must also acknowledge that much of what we know of this country today, and indeed this very institution, including its culture, economic growth, and development throughout history and across time, have been made possible by the labor of enslaved Africans and their descendants. We are indebted to their labor and their sacrifice, and we must acknowledge that the tremors of that violence throughout generations and the resulting impact can still be felt and witnessed today. So, about the Center for Justice. The Center for Justice was founded in 2014 by 3 women. Our beloved colleague, Kathy Boudin, Cheryl Wilkins, and Geraldine Downey. The Center for Justice is committed to ending mass incarceration and criminalization and advancing alternative approaches to justice and safety through education, research, and policy change. Its mission is to help transform approaches to justice from being driven by punishment and retribution and to being centered on prevention, healing, and accountability. This year's conference is bringing together a fantastic group of people to exchange strategies and practice and build power together to create the world we need. So I won't sort of talk to you all day because I'm excited not to take some time for our plenary, but I do want to just make sure that you turn your phones off, right? Because we were raised right. If you go out, try to just minimally sort of, make a fuss. And then we will have lunch let me see, let me run through the schedule for you. So first plenary, that's from 10 to 11:15. There's a workshop block from 11:30 to 12:45. We'll have lunch on the sea level from 1 to 2, and then we'll gather back quickly at 2:15 for our afternoon plenary. So if you leave the room, take your things with you. And I think that's it. Have a wonderful time. And I'm going to turn it over to our moderator, Doug Wood, to introduce our panel.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Good morning.
It is such a pleasure to be back at this conference. I, for 8 years, was a program officer at the Ford Foundation and funded this conference for many years. I think of Kathy a lot, and I love Cheryl and everyone that's been involved with this for a long time. And I've been able to see a lot of old friends this morning, people like Charlene and Mark and others. So it's a pleasure to be here. And before I introduce the panel and ask them to introduce themselves, actually, I just want to remind everybody what this panel is about. We're going to be exploring how struggles for justice intersect globally and how international dialogue can strengthen local movements around dignity and justice. And this is something that I'm really excited about. We have an amazing panel, and I would like for them to introduce themselves, and I'll say a little bit myself, and then we can get into the program. So I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, Dawn.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Dawn Harrington. I am the executive director of Free Hearts, a Tennessee statewide organization that's led by formerly incarcerated women. The special projects manager for the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And we are members of the International Network of Formerly Incarcerated Women, a network of formerly incarcerated women and formerly incarcerated women-led organizations that span across over 30 countries, across 6 continents, every continent except Antarctica, that are working together to ultimately end the incarceration of women and girls around the world.
Great, fantastic. Teresa?
Yeah, good morning all. My name is Teresa Njoroge from Nairobi, Kenya. I run an organization called Clean Start Africa. We work to empower justice-impacted women, youth, and children on the continent of Africa. We are also members of the Global Alliance of Civil Society on Prison Reform, convened by the Penal Reform International UK. We run a movement called Sisters Supporting Sisters, which is a movement of formerly incarcerated women, again, across the African continent. And we work to see to it that we are not only bringing reforms within the penal institutions, working with the criminal justice actors on the continent, but also seeing to it that we have people-centered correctional institutions, and seeing to it that we are eradicating and deleting the remnants of the colonization and its effect on our criminal justice system. It's such a great honor and privilege to be here this morning.
Mariana?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Mariana Viana. I'm from Brazil, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And I'm a PhD candidate for a PhD program in sociology and law in Brazil and Federal Fluminense University. And in this university, I work with families and the mothers and other people in eh, the prison. And I will talk with you in Portuguese because it's better for me to explain what I I need to say. So it's a pleasure stay here, and thank you for this opportunity.
So just to reintroduce myself, I'm Doug Wood, Director of the Aspen Criminal Justice Reform Initiative. For 8 years, I was at the Ford Foundation, and 2 years was our Global Director of Higher Education in the U.S., Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Northern Africa, Southern Africa, Egypt, China, and Indonesia. And so I was so excited when the great Vivian Nixon, who I love and adore, Vivian, everybody knows Vivian? Moderate this panel, so it's a pleasure and honor to be here, and particularly with this great panel. So my first question is really around the whole idea of solidarity. And solidarity invites us to think about connections beneath visible struggles. So can you talk about what common themes you see across movements in different parts of the world, and how does that impact the work that you're doing?
Yes, absolutely. So when it comes to global solidarity, we have to think about the fact that the system itself is a global system. It's a global political, economic, and social system that is fueled by capitalism, colonialism, structural racism, all of the things. And so our resistance and our solidarity is not just, a luxury. It is what we need to actually overcome. What we've seen as we have began to connect across borders is that it doesn't matter what side of a border that you're from, there's significant similarities between our experiences all around the world. And so that includes the criminalization of poverty. And, it's interesting, like, as we first started coming together, like, and noticing, like, the different campaigns that folks have, there was a criminalization of poverty campaign. We had one in Tennessee at Free Hearts. There was one in Brazil, in one of our sister organizations there. There was one in, I want to say, Uganda and different places. And so, although we didn't coordinate on these things, these are issues that go across borders. Philippines, our sisters in the Philippines. And so we also see, the criminalization of sexual and domestic violence. We also see the impact of the family separation and how that impacts us all over the world. And by far, one of the issues that really connects us is the global war on drugs, which basically, started here in the United States with, Nixon announcing the war on drugs, but it has become a global system. And we know that by far it's not about drugs. It's a war on poverty. And even more so than that, it's a war on women navigating trauma, a war on women navigating survival, a war on women who play marginal roles in survival economies. And so these are some of the issues that we see. But to what I said in the beginning, it's a global system that we're up against. And so our solutions have to be global as well.
Any other common themes you want to talk about, Teresa?
It's the same, we're meeting here today at a time of profound global upheaval. whichever side you look at it, and the challenges that are happening in the world. The bottom of that chasm is what happens within prison systems, you know, underlying challenges across the world, as my sister Dawn has articulately expressed, is, you know, around poverty and the criminalization of poverty, whether you look at it from Cambodia, Mexico, the different countries in Africa, parts of Europe, you know, it doesn't matter what part of the world you're looking at this issue from. It's a global issue, and the underlying circumstances are the same. The criminalization of poverty, pushing the vulnerable and the marginalized way much farther. It's victims who are turned into criminals as opposed to getting the support that they need, you know. And while those who are incarcerated world over are some of the ostracized people in the world, we find that in a space of shrinking civic engagement, funding has been cut short in our work to do with prison reform, to do with women empowerment, gender issues, and so on and so forth. And so it's so critical for the kinds of meetings and discussions that we're having here for us to really take them a notch higher. It's war. It's war against the very vulnerable. And the governments know what they're doing. The system knows very well what they're doing. It's by design, you know. It's by design. And so it's a time when we really need to come together, strengthen our alliances. This is the time to advocate together, you know, because we're sitting right here in New York, but whatever we're discussing here is affecting people in Mexico, it's affecting people in Africa, it's affecting people in Australia. This is that time to pull our resources together. This is that time to send out standardized communication. Because if we don't, what we're up against is a unified war, literally, against the vulnerable and against the poor and against the marginalized. It's a race issue and so on and so forth. And so it's incredible to see the efforts that have come in here together, especially now, seeing the shrinking civic space and the shrinking funding that's coming into this space.
Can I just ask you a little bit about the civic infrastructure? You mentioned the importance of it. Could you say a little bit more about the importance of building and supporting civic infrastructure, even in the context of funding being reduced, et cetera? This is the point you had made in what you just said.
Indeed, and it's efforts like this where people get to know what their rights are, because you find that a lot of people who are pushed into the margins and a lot of people who are turned into victims really never did understand what their rights were. We're finding that a lot of governments are now authoritative, so much for American being a democratic country, you know, which is so unfortunate, because when democracy is taken away, and that's what has gone out the door, and we're now entertaining authoritarianism, you know, the ripple effect of that is that the citizen rights are taken away from you that you would ordinarily fight for, that you would ordinarily understand and know those are my rights. But that's what immediately gets out. So collectively, what we really need to do is take that civic education to the next level. Let everyone get to understand what their rights are, you know? And then it's the standing together as opposed to them versus ours. You know, at this level, when you start saying it's them versus ours, on top, it's one cohort. It's one cohort, and they've got each other's back. It's here where they use the divide and rule, you know, because they know how that benefits them at the end of the day. So we need so much unity over and above skin color, gender, and all that kind of stuff, because the more divisions you have, the easier it is for them to win this against us, you know? So let's look at ourselves as a block, because I say this again. I've just come from Amsterdam, where we had the Global Alliance for Civil Society on Prison Reform. It's the same thing in Amsterdam that we're now coming to discuss here in New York. So it really doesn't matter where you're looking at this from. We've got to look at ourselves as one block and understand what our mission at the end of the day is. We're fighting against the punitive laws. We're fighting against the pushback that we're getting. And we're not fighting as them versus a particular gender or a particular race. It's the social economic status that's being fought here, where you can't afford good quality of education, you know, because the supply is not enough. You can't afford good health care. And we see this when we go into our prisons. We see who's being incarcerated in the millions, you know? So let's continue increasing and being very deliberate when it comes to civic education, people understanding their rights, and a lot more, you know, being united and fighting as one. So I'm looking forward to see a lot of alliances and a lot of drawing resources together for a lot of this work to continue. Because if we don't, what we're up against is way much stronger and very well organized and thought through. So we truly need to come up with great strategies of how we're going to address this.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Mariana, your thoughts on this?
Yeah. Então, no Brasil, né, a gente tem a solidariedade e a coletividade muito presente nos movimentos sociais em prol das pessoas em privação de liberdade.
So in Brazil, there's a lot of collective and social solidarity for and with people who have been deprived of liberty.
E o maior desafio, né, para essa coletividade muitas vezes compreender que o sistema de justiça continua sendo um sistema de justiça colonial e desigual.
So the biggest challenge.
Could you put your mic a little closer?
I'll just share. So the biggest challenge for this solidarity and collectivism is understanding that the colonial system is what we're fighting against.
Então, quando a gente fala de solidariedade e de coletividade, a gente precisa falar da luta das mulheres, principalmente das mulheres negras, na luta pelas pessoas que estão em privação de liberdade, tanto no sistema prisional adulto, quanto no sistema socioeducativo para adolescentes e jovens cumprindo medida socioeducativa.
So when we talk about this challenge, we have to, the challenge towards collectiveness and solidarity, we have to realize that we're focusing first.
Speak up, please.
Focusing first on women of color, and also kids in the juvenile system, kids and teenagers.
Então, e para a gente, e para essas mulheres compreenderem, né, a luta, não somente através da dor, né, e dos desafios, né, nós, como sociedade, precisamos compreender que as mulheres, ao longo da história, têm o papel principal na luta pelos seus. Então, pelos seus filhos, maridos.
So we have to understand, like, historically, when we're looking at this issue, women's role in terms of their their families, their kids, their communities.
Para falar um pouco do sistema de justiça no Brasil, o Brasil, antes de ter um Código Civil, ele teve um Código Penal. Então, antes mesmo do processo formal de abolição.
So when we're talking about the Brazilian system, we have to understand that there was a penal code before there was a civil code.
E após a abolição formal da escravidão, né, digamos assim, houve um processo político no Brasil de construção de um mito da democracia racial, onde a gente chama de o mito das três raças, né, que vivem harmonicamente em território brasileiro, né, que seriam as pessoas pretas, brancas e indígenas.
So before the formal abolition of slavery in Brazil, there was a creation of a deliberate creation of a myth of the living together of three races, white, black, and indigenous.
E com a reprodução até hoje desse sistema de justiça, né, que visa o poder e a punição, desde a escravidão, a gente tem a luta das mulheres negras em prol dos seus filhos e seus maridos, principalmente aqueles que estavam em privação de liberdade ou que ainda estavam sobre as leis escravistas.
Sorry, I missed the beginning. Can you say it again?
Não,
And then we're going to move on to the next question
Okay.
of this. Yeah.
Basically, focusing on women, black women who have been holding it together.
Então, até hoje, no Brasil, os movimentos, né, de familiares e mães de pessoas em privação de liberdade ou que tiveram seus filhos mortos pelo Estado, trabalha em coletividade e em solidariedade.
So it's the mothers, most often black mothers, who either have been deprived of their own liberty or have lost kids to this, the system, that are really responsible for this movement and the solidarity.
That actually builds on the next question I was going to ask, actually. It's very connected in the sense that I would be curious to hear what you have been doing in your own work that other advocates can adapt or learn from, because I'm particularly mindful of the work in South Africa. I spent a lot of time in South Africa with Ford, and I'm reminded of the anti-apartheid work there and how they adopted a lot of the American civil rights strategies, particularly when it comes to tactics of resistance, legal challenges, and global solidarity. So if we could talk about that in terms of your work and how your work can be, other advocates can learn from you and adapt your work, would be really useful, I think.
Yes, so as far as with that, for example, we have cross-pollinated each other a lot as the International Network of Formerly Incarcerated Women. So for example, we have 4 work teams. One is advocacy and campaigns. And along those lines, on one side of it, we have advocated to international bodies, the United Nations, and other international bodies around the issue of women's incarceration. And really have said it from South Africa, from Colombia, from Mexico, from just basically countries all over, Indonesia, Malaysia, just telling them our stories and just reiterating in the international space and pushing the issue of women's incarceration there. In addition to that, within the campaigns, I mentioned that some of the campaigns that we already had pre-existing aligned, but also we've learned from each other's campaigns that we have. Like, for example, in the United States, um, there has been several organizations that passed community-based alternatives to incarceration for primary caretakers. Um, Within Tennessee, at Free Hearts, we passed it as well, but it's passed in about 7 states. Well, our sister organization in Colombia, they've passed almost a better version of it in the whole country of Colombia. And now, like, our sister organization in Zambia, Tatandazani Comfort Home, is working on pushing that out there. And so it's like ways that we've learned from each other. And it's not just like us as the United States. Like, that's definitely not what it is, because we have a whole lot to learn from everyone else in the strategies of resistance that have been pushed this whole time. We also, along those same lines, it's not just what we're pushing back against and building. What we're pushing back against and burning down, which is this system, but it's also we're building. We're building, we have a work team called Economic Empowerment and Changing the Narrative. And so we're building, where some of our sister organizations are already building economic opportunities, like a piggery co-op, a chicken co-op, multimedia co-op, sewing co-op, or other different food trucks, beauty supplies, the different ways that, because a lot of times, just like here, whereas often it's hard you get locked out of the economic system, or it becomes very difficult, that is exacerbated in some of the other contexts. And so just figuring out, like, how are we going to, sustain ourselves, and figuring that out together and really learning from each other on this. Along those same lines, it's like education and training, where all of us are students and all of us are teachers. And shout out to Columbia Institute of Justice, which is really training on storytelling and telling your story, because in some context, it's dangerous to say I'm formerly incarcerated. It's very it's very dangerous. So really helping everyone to embrace the power from that pain that we have within our stories. And last but not least is really self-care, which is, we know, like, this work is hard. We a lot of times come into incarceration in contact with the carceral systems because of trauma. And then it's exacerbated from being involved in the system. And now we're re-traumatizing ourselves over and over as we're fighting against the same system, going in and out of these facilities, and, just can't open the door and let everybody out. And so it's a bunch of trauma that we're holding. And so we also have to heal ourselves. And that's another core thing of what we're doing as a collective.
Okay. Thanks, Dawn. Your thoughts on that, Teresa?
And I love the fact that we have replicated Beyond the Bars after attending the Beyond the Bars conferences here. And we now hold the Beyond the Bars Africa Conference. You're most welcome to attend Beyond the Bars Africa. And how did we get there? We replicated what we found here, and we used Beyond the Bars Africa Conference as a conference where we bring all the key players. And, in addition to academia, the justice-impacted community, the criminal justice actors, what we're loving seeing is the corporate sector now committing their funding into this work, which is just incredible, because profits is one thing, but on the other hand, we've got to think about the environment and the social impact and governance in any nation. And of course, we've brought in the faith-based aspect, because that's a very strong pillar in the African culture. and the faith pillar drives a lot of change in communities and in society. And so it's really good to see them on board of the changes that we're doing. But before we got to that pinnacle of the success that we're seeing on the continent and the allies and alliance that we have formed in Africa, we've got to understand that it's a very dicey and very, complicated space, because the foundation of incarceration on the continent, is purely a colonization theory, because Africa never had prisons to begin with. They brought incarceration and the prison system to the Africans. We've got the Ubuntu culture, and we know how to correct one another. We're very community-oriented people. Everyone is in everyone's business. I actually get a breather when I'm out here, because, I can get a few minutes of, no one's in my business and ask me, where are you, what are you doing, and all that kind of stuff. But there are lots of advantages when you live as a community, because things like homelessness, hunger, all these issues are dealt with from a community perspective. Same with correction. If someone has done something wrong, there's what we call the barazas, and the chiefs and the elders come together and do the correction. But when you bring this foreign aspect of getting someone from your community and, putting them behind bars, it's a very foreign concept for us, and it doesn't work. It doesn't correct. What you've done is that you've just interrupted an ecosystem that knew how to operate and heal itself. So, while we're addressing and dealing with this foreign entity of incarceration and separating families from each other, we've had to rethink incarceration and how to bring in who we are innate as a people. And as we're bringing back the core principles of who we are, because I cannot come to the United States and start saying, you'll now have to adopt the Ubuntu way of living and the Ubuntu way of correcting your community. You cannot do that. But unfortunately, that's what happened to us. And unfortunately, even though the colonizer is not in person colonizing us, they still are, unfortunately, colonizing us through neocolonialism and very many other ways, so that when they identify that you're trying to bring independence of thought and independence of your culture and who you are, they will definitely shut you out, because they still have their tentacles on the ground as much as they're not present. So that's why I say it's dicey and it's complicated, and that's where the issue of funding comes in. So we've got to stay awake and know that while the person we're fighting might not be visible, they're very invisible and very much in our business. But what we've done is really strengthen the alliances on the ground, because in the very first place, that's how we won our independence. There are times and instances where we taught them lessons. Our grandfathers taught them lessons through what we call the Mau Mau. For those who are history students, you'd understand the Mau Mau movement. We really know, because we do not have the guns and all this, if you look at the war that's happening right now, which is, it's mortifying to see, because nations have nuclear energy, and when others are building their nuclear energy, then we attack them, and you wonder, why are we in other people's businesses while we ourselves, but that's other people's, let's deal with our own African problems. But what I'm trying to insinuate here is we all know how we fight our wars based on our own cultures. So the Mau Mau way is a very undercover, underground way of fighting our wars. And that's what we're still applying to date. Very undercover, very under the water, under the radar, you wouldn't tell. And that's the alliances that we are building on the ground. So while here you might call it civil education or, educating people, on their rights and all that kind of stuff, when you really know who you are, it's the only way and place that you can truly fight your enemy. Yeah? So that's what we're getting back to. And we are regrouping ourselves to really come up with a justice system that speaks to our culture, a justice system that speaks to us, because prisons are places where human rights go, that's where people's human rights are taken away. That's bottom line, that's what it is. And so until we begin to educate ourselves and come into reality of who we truly are, then you cannot fight your enemy using their skills or using their ways or using their weapons. You've got to use what's yours. And that's what we've adopted on the continent. So we've got this allyship that we're forming from people in DRC, Burundi, Cote d'Ivoire, Kenya, and across the continent. And we know that the stronger this allyship continues to grow, we sooner rather than later are going to delete these laws that were imposed on us, laws that don't make sense to the African culture or African community. And we're very strong to bring in our faith because we know who we truly were before they came and imposed what they imposed to us.
So, Mariana, tell us about Brazil and the work that you're doing and your strategies and how it can be used and applied for advocates elsewhere.
As estratégias mais evidentes que temos no Brasil são as estratégias coletivas. Né? Os coletivos de familiares e coletivos de mães, principalmente coletivos liderados por mulheres, mulheres negras, inclusive.
So the most obvious or evident strategies that we have are in the collectives, and these are collectives of women, they're collectives of women deprived of liberty, and Black women.
E muitas vezes são formadas associações, né, e comunidades locais que acabam se tornando associações e redes nacionais. Né? Então, temos algumas associações e redes que surgiram da luta de mães em seus estados e que tomaram uma proporção nacional.
So mostly these collectives sort of start locally, kind of grow up, and then branch out and often become national.
E além disso, essas redes e associações, elas buscam apoios e parcerias com outras instituições, né, sejam públicas ou privadas, e até mesmo a universidade, que é o meu caso, o caso do programa de extensão ao qual eu trabalho.
So these collectives are strengthened by their alliances with each other, with private society, public society, and often, as in her case, with universities.
E aí, essas atividades e associações e redes, elas são, no caso da onde eu trabalho, né, para prestar um acolhimento, então seria uma escuta qualificada, e aí a gente também entra na questão, né, do trauma e de como a prisão ou a morte física, né, dos filhos e familiares afetam esses familiares, né? Essas mães, principalmente.
So, like in my case, I'm like a professional listener. So I'm able to sort of gather in people and help them process their trauma, help them also network with each other.
Muitas vezes as mães de adolescentes e jovens que são internados ou que cumprem alguma medida socioeducativa, elas dizem que quando seu filho é internado, inicia-se a morte. E que inicialmente é uma morte simbólica, uma morte social, mas que ao longo da vida pode vir a se tornar uma morte física e muito violenta.
So the mothers of kids who are either deprived of liberty themselves or somehow involved in the juvenile system, sort of understand this deprivation of liberty of their kids as a death, like a symbolic death in a way, as they're removed from the community, but also it kind of has a mark of death on them for life.
E com relação às mulheres em privação de liberdade, a estratégia dos coletivos funcionam como uma prestação de assistência para as mulheres em situação de privação de liberdade, porque muitas vezes elas são abandonadas no cárcere.
Okay.
Abandonadas no cárcere.
Okay. So for the women who are themselves deprived of liberty, they are, they need these connections and networks because many times they are abandoned in that incarceration.
Então, muitas vezes esse abandono acontece por familiares sentirem algum tipo de vergonha ou ter esse trauma da prisão, mas também porque outras mulheres da família estão cuidando do seu lar e de seus filhos.
So this, abandonment happens for various reasons, but among them is, the shame that the family feels, the trauma, and also a resentment of having to then take care of the kids or the rest of the family.
Can I build on that and I'm going to switch that question up a little bit and start with you, Mariana, and come up this way. So when I think about the collectives that you've been talking about and the challenges, particularly for women, can you describe to us how the political dynamics that exist both in Brazil and globally has impacted your work? And then how do you suggest for us to sustain the work that we're doing, not just regionally, but globally? And that's a question for
Qualquer trabalho realizado no Brasil com pessoas em privação de liberdade gera uma burocracia muito grande de acesso ao sistema prisional.
So any type of reform or regarding the justice system, the carceral system in Brazil is confronted with like a massive amount of bureaucracy.
Então, muitas vezes a assistência, né, e a solidariedade acontece por vias de redes e associações que trabalham com atividades específicas.
So, as a result of that, many times the reforms and strategies happen outside the system. So they're really looking to each other.
A principal seria que a gente trabalhou, né, teve uma parceria, foi a assistência religiosa do candomblé, de uma mãe de santo do candomblé, né, da religião de matriz africana muito popular no Brasil, que ela leva assistência religiosa para o sistema prisional feminino, mas não só. Ela, através dessa assistência religiosa, ela informa sobre direitos, leva materiais de higiene e de necessidades individuais que muitas vezes o Estado não fornece.
So one of the best strategies that we have now is an alliance with, a religious alliance with Candomblé, which is an African, Candomblé. Candomblé. It's a African-based religion, and so the women, the mothers of Candomblé can go inside, with this religious mission, but at the same time bring hygiene products, bring information about rights. So these kinds of connections are able to really directly connect and strengthen the connect networks.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you that same question, Dawn, and I'll get to you also, Teresa, on this question. So just to reinforce again, we heard about the political dynamics in Brazil. Would love to hear about what political dynamics, well, we kind of have an idea, but what political dynamics here and internationally is impacting your work, and how do you see that impacting sustainability?
Yeah, so first of all, of course, United States is the biggest incarcerator in the whole world, and yet have pushed a lot of the politics around carceral logics in UN bodies and in different places as best practices. So we've seen things that we adopt here that are harmful pop up in places that we've never seen. For example, like private prisons, for example. And along those same lines is just like we're seeing a rise in authoritarianism, like Teresa said, and right-wing politics, white Christian nationalism. We're starting to see that, that's like a global coalition that has definitely formed, and that has a lot of power and strength right now. And additionally, as within that, we've seen like the impact on, for example, USAID, where in countries that, even if some of our sister organizations weren't funded directly by them, that the indirect nature of how money flows through, where a lot of our sisters have, where we already had employment issues, where some that were employed and like doing this work that have lost that completely and have lost jobs, where we already had so many other people that needed jobs and needed employment, but even with the ones that did, we're seeing such a pullback and just a rise in the same things that we're seeing here and exacerbated globally. And not to mention the impact of the quote unquote natural disasters that the flooding, the earthquakes, all of these other things from climate change that are also having deep impact of our sisters more frequently and just more devastatingly. Haiti, Jamaica, Kenya, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. And so as far as how do we sustain ourselves through this, that's a big part of what the global solidarity is needed for. We literally need each other to get through the foreseeable future, and have to come together. Mutual aid, organizing together to actually change things. Mutual aid, building these new economical systems, new economical empowerment, And, being able to what Teresa said, also like share resources, pool resources, because it's so difficult right now. And so, but the main thing that we need to sustain each other is each other. Is each other. And that's why this global solidarity is key to a strategy when you're up against a global system like this.
Teresa, and then we'll open up for Q&A.
We are seeing a lot of pressure on, for instance, erosion of the rule of law, quite some pressure in justice systems across the world. And what happens in times like this, then it's the fact that the vulnerable, the poor, the marginalized, they're the ones who pay the heaviest price during times like this across the world. And for us in Kenya, while we know that we do not have priority at the moment on anything to do with prison reform, and that's because Kenya is just at the verge of having a presidential election. And so no funds or efforts are currently going into prison reform, because then prison is used as a tool to ensure that the incumbent maintains power. And this is not just Kenya. We see a lot of this happening in a lot of the African countries. Well, the other countries that call themselves the developed countries, which again raises the issue around language, the developed countries, the global south, the global north. And this language is very intentional, to make us believe in our minds. And that's why we truly, truly need to educate ourselves. And we really need to take power and know that we're the most powerful people in this equation. We are the decision makers, but we consume everything we're told and everything that's sold to us. And we continue reiterating what we're being told by using that very same language, continuing to play into their divide and rule games. So we've got to be aware and conscious and intentional and not be lazy. And when I talk about being lazy, I'm meaning, don't just consume for the sake of consuming. Do the hard work of interrogating. Ask the extra why question and question it more. We are holding government and institutions accountable, whatever the cost, whatever it takes, especially now when the cost of holding them accountable is very high. I come from a country where the stigmatization of anyone coming from prison is very high. People literally are still committing suicide because of stigmatization of coming from prison, which is just an experience. They told us that when someone has done a wrong, then they go into prison and they pay the price for the wrong that they have done. Yet we see so many people committing crimes, and well, because of who they are or the money that they have or the influence that they have, then they don't deserve to go to prison. But there's a particular caliber of people that deserves to go into prison. We need to continue pushing back and asking questions and doing the work of holding people accountable pretty much. So the more we're looking at this stigmatization, I spoke about women who got burnt in prison, raped and burnt in the DRC, and so many other, oh my goodness, so many other painful things happening. This is a matter of life and death. And it's a matter of life and death for the voiceless, and voiceless in a very deliberate manner, So we are forming allies and allyship within the system, because there always will be allies who can work with you to bring the change that you want to bring. Kenya is about to delete the petty offenses that were left in our statute books. And there has been a very heavy price to pay for this change to happen. And we know that once this change happens, it's going to have a ripple effect across the continent, because it's the same petty offenses that were left by the colonizers when they were trying to subjugate the locals so that they could steal our land shamelessly, and then call these places their own, unbelievable. And it's the same shamelessness that they still operate with to date, where they think that they can invade countries, and take over. Who told you you know the best for the locals, for the citizens, and that what you're bringing is better just because of your skin color? What a shame in this day and age. But having said that, we are strategically positioning ourselves in places that, like the African Union. For the very first time, it was incredible to see this very matter being discussed at the Commission of Status of Women, the CSW, that has just concluded here in New York, just strategically ensuring that our issues are being addressed where the power and the resources sit, and it doesn't matter where I'm coming from. I deserve a table, but a seat at the table, but more than that, I need veto power. I need to vote. I need to contribute towards something that at the end of the day results into policy or law.
That's great.
Bottom line, there's a price that has to be paid. Bottom line, we've truly got to do the hard work of holding government and the institutions that matter accountable. And each and every one of us has to be willing to do the hard work and don't be deviated by whatever difficulties are coming your way. At the end of the day, make sure you're living there with the law, make sure that a law has been deleted if it doesn't serve you, or just make sure that it's policy at the end of the day. That's where the lasting, sustainable change is.
Well, that is a great way to move into the Q&A. I'm going to give you this mic, and I will use the other one.
Quick protocol for Q&A. I'm going to begin with the question on WOVA. As I go to whoever, put your hands up, I'll go to you. We are gathering the wisdom of the panel. I know there's a lot of experience in the room, so I'm asking for grace. If your question turns into a long monologue, I will gently tap your shoulder. That means please stop. All right? Are we in agreement? Are we in agreement? Yes. I love agreement. All right. The first question from Hoover, and then I'll come to the back. The question is, what distinguishes efforts that create lasting systemic change from those that show early promise but fail?
Who wants to take that?
I think at the end of the day, you could do good for the sake of doing good. And you've got to differentiate noise from what's really bringing the change that truly matters. I strongly believe, just using the example of the work that we're doing in Kenya and on the continent, it's going after the laws. Delete the laws that the colonizers left. It's simple. Those laws are what are giving power to the police, prosecution, and the judiciary to take the poor to prison. Delete the laws. As long as the laws remain in the statute books, the police will wake up tomorrow and arrest the next person. They'll prosecute them, they will incarcerate them. Go after the laws, ensure they're deleted. Bottom line.
And Dawn wants...
Yeah, and then in other cases, just make it policy. Make sure it's policy. So you could be on one side advocating and talking about, against how painful it is, how wrong it is, but for how long will you keep talking about how wrong whatever it is that they're doing is wrong? So go after ensuring it's permanent and it's done.
Dawn, you want to say what? Yeah, I just want to add to that is if the policies that also shrink the system, that also decarcerate or bring people home. And so so that's something that can be quantified. Like, is it something that is like, shrinking, that's bringing more people home, that's shrinking the system, that's diverting the resources, which is billions and billions of dollars that we use as a global society to incarcerate and cage people, diverting those funds into the actual care that people need, housing, health care, education, mental health care, treatment, all of those things. If we're divesting the funds and if we're decarcerating, decriminalizing in policy, then that is lasting sustainable change and shrinking the system as a whole.
Okay, next question.
So Teresa, you mentioned what has happened in Africa. Can you share those ideas with the mayor and the governor, particularly the governor who's up for re-election this year, which is sad?
All right. If I get the question right, if we would share the ideas that we have with the mayor and the governor, yeah, we'd definitely love to share these ideas because they're tried and tested. They're working. It's a model that's working, and I'm very open, not only to share, but to support with the implementation, the piloting, the implementation, the funding, and ensuring that it's being applied so that people can have their rights and that we can move forward progressively, And in America, it's so easy. You've got the infrastructure. It's just that people are benefiting from the fact that no one is pushing back and holding the people who are meant to be held accountable to change what they need to change.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, next question.
Greetings, everyone. My question is for Dawn, and anyone can answer, around can you speak a little bit more about the cross-pollination that you talked about throughout the continent and just throughout the world? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, by that, like no one is the holder or the keeper of all the knowledge. And just like with pollination, it's like with cross-pollination, it's like the bee that's going around and pouring into each other. We're sharpening each other by learning from, oh, you did that here, or the way, like even right now, I'm learning so much from my co-panelists. I'm just writing everything down because these are things that we can adopt. Right. And so the cross-pollination is just so important to understand that no one is the keeper of knowledge. Like all of us have something that we can learn from each other. And we have to create the spaces to be able to do that.
Do we have anybody on this side that asked a question?
Let me get one from here first, and then I'll move across.
Great.
So this one is for Mariana around the mark of the death-bound subject piece that you talked about. The question is, what cultural mechanisms or community mechanisms do you have for re-bringing people into community or into society? Just how are you all approaching that?
Uma questão que a gente trabalha no Brasil e que é muito discutida pelas pessoas que trabalham com o sistema prisional é a questão da ressocialização, né?
So one of the biggest things that we encounter when we're talking about reform is reintegrating people.
O que, de fato, a gente, como pesquisador da área e que atua na área, compreende e e ver na prática é que não há como ressocializar alguém que anteriormente não foi socializado, né? A partir do momento que existe uma divisão social, racial principalmente no Brasil, onde tudo é ausente, não tem como a gente dizer que a partir do cárcere essa pessoa será ressocializada.
So as somebody who works directly with, that's my focus is, people coming home, I can tell you that there's no such thing as reintegrating somebody who's never been integrated into society. And for people who have been marginalized and discriminated against, you have to start before that.
Então, mas existem algumas iniciativas, principalmente com egressos do sistema prisional, que fazem um trabalho na tentativa de proporcionar aos egressos do sistema prisional oportunidades que podem fazer diferença na vida deles e de suas famílias. Então, a gente...
Okay, so we do have some, things that are working in terms of bringing people home and providing options for them. Options, I think, well, she's going to talk more about it, but that are working.
Nossa principal parceria com a universidade com relação a isso com a associação Eu Sou Eu, a Ferrugem, que é uma associação formada por sobreviventes do cárcere e que buscam recursos para que pessoas possam concluir os estudos ou ingressar em uma universidade. Eu sou eu, a Ferrugem.
Okay, so one of the best groups, organizations that we have is called I Am My Own Tool. I Am My Own Tool. So this is bringing people back to school, mostly back to the university to finish their studies or to start their study.
Okay. So I'm a former middle school principal, which means we end on time. So we have time for one more question.
Hello, my name is Mark Honus. I'm from Los Angeles, California, El Camino College with the FIRST program. And I'm formerly incarcerated person as well. My question is, we know that the system is messed up, but where does personal accountability come into play? I did the dirt I did. And I know the issues that we got in America is completely different. I've lived in Panama, been to Sweden, Canada, and so forth and so on. The issues we have here is a lot different than everywhere else. So I know the system is messed up, but a lot of times we choose to do the things that we do, and you learn from it or you don't. So where does accountability come in for the actions that you have done?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I feel like it's kind of a pushback sometimes also on abolition. It's like, okay, well, what are we supposed to do? And I think that's why it was really powerful what Teresa said about Ubuntu. And I remember one of my best examples was when I was with our sisters in Ghana. And we went to what was essentially actually I was with Mass Liberation Network in Ghana. And we went to what essentially was a court situation where we were in a community. Everybody had on black because it was like so many people there. And everybody had on black because being each other's business, we're mourning because somebody has to be held accountable for what they did. And the elders were up there and the chiefs, and the person that had the judicial powers was getting feedback from the elders of like, what can we do? What is going to be the accountability mechanism? And the main thing, and this is what really stood out to me, the main purpose, the main goal was figuring out how to restore their role within the community. It wasn't like punishing. That's right. It was about restoring your role within the community. So the system is horrible, and yes, accountability is still very important. But when our goal is just punishment for punishment's sake, and it's a life sentence because you never can get over it, as opposed to, as a community, we are a village, we are each other's business, and our main goal is to figure out how to restore our people back into our community. That's a whole different ball game than what we have here right now.
That is the best. They've been fantastic. Thank you, Mariana. Thank you, Teresa. Thank you, Dawn. Thank you to the interpreter. Thank you also for sign language. And thank you all for a wonderful, fabulous conference. It's great to be back. Oh, we want to say one thing. Sorry.
Let me just say, y'all did that. Hey, hold on. Listen, y'all. I'm like, we talked about being raised right earlier, did we not? All right. Let's thank our panel again. I learned a lot, and I think that some of the connections y'all made were like really sort of crystallized some things for me. And I'm sure for the rest of the crowd here, like all of the factors sort of going into, like, we don't start at jails and prisons. There's so much before that, and there's so much after that. So thank you for naming that continuity. I'm gonna actually just have to go back and rewatch, right, to sort of really get some of that in. So y'all, we know we have the workshop block next, and I just went through and looked at all of these workshops. Y'all gonna have a hard time choosing. There's just so many. But do that, and then remember that lunch is after your workshop block on Sea Level from 1 to 2. And then we are back here promptly at 2:15 for our afternoon plenaries. Thank you for being so wonderful. Enjoy.
I know. We gotta take our picture real quick.
Yeah.